In the bitterly cold winter of 1777, Pennsylvania became the silent witness to one of the most extraordinary chapters in American history. The Revolutionary War had dragged on for 2 years, and the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, faced unprecedented hardships. But few knew that the story of Valley Forge was more than frostbitten toes and starvation. It was a crucible in which loyalty, espionage, and human endurance intertwined to shape the birth of a nation. Among the soldiers was Thomas Whitaker, a young man from Massachusetts whose father had once fought in the French and Indian War. Thomas was not a typical soldier. He carried with him a small leather-bound journal filled with observations, sketches, and clandestine notes. The journal, which would later become a crucial artifact for historians, contained details of secret meetings with foreign emissaries, coded messages about British troop movements, and the untold stories of men and women who risked everything for liberty. As the icy wind whipped through the barren trees, Thomas and his fellow soldiers learned to survive not only against the elements, but against the invisible enemy of despair. Each day was a battle. Food was scarce, morale was fragile, and disease lurked in every tent. Yet, hidden beneath the ordinary suffering, extraordinary acts of bravery and cunning unfolded. One evening, as the sun set over the snow-blanketed camp, Thomas overheard whispers of a mysterious British informant embedded within the American ranks. The man, known only as the Raven, had evaded capture for months, passing secrets that threatened to unravel Washington's carefully orchestrated strategies. Determined to uncover the truth, Thomas embarked on a perilous journey into the heart of enemy intrigue, a journey that would take him far beyond the boundaries of Valley Forge and into the hidden corridors of power, espionage, and betrayal. This story, spanning continents, decades, and the lives of those who shaped early America, would reveal secrets that textbooks had forgotten. It would tell of alliances forged in shadows, of sacrifices made in silence, and of ordinary individuals whose extraordinary courage altered the course of history. And in the end, it would answer a question that haunted Thomas Whitaker and his compatriots. How much is freedom worth, and what price would men and women pay to secure it for generations yet unborn? The frost-bitten ground creaked beneath Thomas Whitaker's boots as he moved cautiously between the tents. The winter night was merciless, and the cold seemed to pierce not just the skin, but the spirit. He had learned early that survival in Valley Forge demanded more than physical endurance. It required vigilance, cunning, and sometimes a willingness to trust those who might betray you. The whispers of the Raven haunted him. Every soldier had heard rumors of the mysterious British informant, an enemy hiding in plain sight, gathering intelligence on Washington's movements. Some dismissed the stories as campfire myths meant to keep men alert, but Thomas had seen the subtle signs of espionage, letters disappearing, coded messages left in breadbaskets, and soldiers suddenly reassigned without explanation. Thomas's path led him to the quartermaster's tent, where he had arranged a secret meeting with Abigail Carter, a young woman who had been smuggling supplies to the army under the guise of tending to her family's farm. Abigail's presence at Valley Forge was unusual, but not unheard of. Women like her were often overlooked by the British, yet they played pivotal roles in sustaining the Continental Army. "You shouldn't be wandering this late," Abigail whispered, her breath fogging in the icy air. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the shadows. "There are eyes everywhere. You must be careful, Thomas." "I have to know," Thomas replied, pulling the journal from under his coat. The Raven isn't just a rumor. I've seen evidence, and if we don't find him, lives will be lost, and the revolution could fail before it even reaches the spring." Abigail nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "Then we work together, but we need more than courage, we need strategy, and I know someone who might help." She led Thomas to a small, concealed hut at the edge of the encampment, where a man named Samuel Knox awaited. Knox had once been a British soldier, a defector who had secretly offered his knowledge to Washington. His insights were invaluable, though not without suspicion. Every man and woman in Valley Forge had secrets, and Knox's were deep and dangerous. "The Raven," Knox murmured, leaning over a crude map of Pennsylvania, "is not what you think. He's not merely a spy. He is an agent provocateur, skilled at turning friend against friend. If we misstep, the information he feeds will fracture our command." Thomas traced a finger along the map, noting the positions of patrols and outposts. "Then we must be smarter. We can't confront him directly, but we can track the inconsistencies, letters, assignments, supply routes." Knox's lips tightened. "Be careful, Whitaker. Spies do not make mistakes, they make opportunities, and opportunity is deadly here." The three of them devised a plan, a web of observation, coded signals, and secret rendezvous. Each day, as the army drilled, built, and endured the harsh conditions, Thomas documented his discoveries in the journal. He sketched tents, coded messages, and even a series of seemingly mundane conversations that, when pieced together, revealed patterns of betrayal. But espionage was not the only danger. Disease was rampant in the camp, and starvation gnawed at morale. The Continental Army was a skeleton of its former self. Men huddled around makeshift fires, chewing on meager rations, while frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Yet in the midst of suffering, acts of heroism unfolded. One night, Thomas witnessed a private named Ezekiel Hawkins save a group of wounded soldiers trapped in a collapsed supply tent. The bravery was quiet, almost unnoticed, but Thomas recorded it meticulously. These were the stories that history often overlooked, ordinary people performing extraordinary acts in the shadows of monumental events. And as the coldest weeks pressed on, Thomas realized that his pursuit of the Raven was not just a matter of survival. It was a test of morality, loyalty, and the human spirit. Little did Thomas know, the journey that began in the snow-laden fields of Valley Forge would carry him across oceans, into the secret chambers of British and French intelligence, and face him with a revelation that would challenge everything he believed about heroism, allegiance, and the cost of liberty. The morning dawned gray and merciless over Valley Forge, a thin mist rising from the frozen earth. Thomas Whitaker moved cautiously through the camp, the leather-bound journal tucked securely under his coat. Every step was measured, every glance over his shoulder a reminder that trust was a luxury the army could not afford. Over the past weeks, Thomas, Abigail, and Samuel Knox had been piecing together fragments, letters, odd assignments, and reports of missing supplies. It was painstaking work, but patterns were beginning to emerge. Certain officers received unexpected orders, others were reassigned without explanation, and in the shadows, coded messages were being passed from one tent to another. Thomas paused at the edge of the officers' mess, where a tall, wiry man named Captain Elbridge Hutchins, a loyal soldier whose allegiance was supposedly unwavering, was speaking in hushed tones to a courier. Something about the way Hutchins glanced around before handing over a folded note set Thomas's instincts on edge. He followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows until Hutchins disappeared behind a small ridge of frozen earth. Thomas crept closer, heart pounding. He needed proof, not rumor, if he were to expose the Raven. The note Hutchins had handed over fluttered in the wind.
With careful fingers, Thomas retrieved it. The paper was thin, almost translucent, and covered in seemingly random sequences of letters and numbers. At first glance, it appeared nonsensical, but Thomas recognized the style from Abigail's previous lessons in cipher and code. "This is it," he whispered, excitement mingled with dread. "This is the Raven's work." Returning to Knox's hut, Thomas spread the note across the table. Knox leaned in, eyes narrowing as he traced the lines. "Ah, yes, this is a classic transposition cipher, the kind British operatives favor. It rearranges letters in a pattern, hiding messages in plain sight. Whoever deciphers this will understand troop movements, supply lines, even the weaknesses of the Continental Army." Abigail's eyes widened. If this falls into the wrong hands— Knox's expression darkened. Then Valley Forge becomes a tomb for those who believe in freedom. For the next several hours, Thomas worked feverishly, translating the coded messages into legible instructions. Every symbol, every letter, every subtle anomaly held meaning. The trail led to a hidden network of loyalists embedded throughout Pennsylvania, farmers, merchants, and even some officers who reported to the Raven. As Thomas read the decrypted notes aloud, a chilling truth emerged. The Raven had been orchestrating a plan not merely to observe, but to manipulate. The Continental Army's supply shortages, the reassignment of officers, and the timing of skirmishes had all been influenced by his intelligence. "We are dealing with someone brilliant," said Knox grimly. "Someone who understands the Army as well as Washington himself. One false move and everything collapses." The trio realized that confrontation was inevitable, but first they needed to understand their enemy fully. Thomas's journal became more than a record. It became a map, a guide, and a repository of secrets. Sketches of tents, supply routes, and patrol patterns filled the pages. Abigail contributed her knowledge of local farmers who secretly aided the Army, while Knox supplied the strategic perspective of someone who once served the British Crown. By nightfall, Thomas felt the weight of the truth settle upon him. The Raven was not just a spy, he was a shadow in every decision, a phantom in every corner of the camp. Yet, amidst the danger, Thomas also discovered something remarkable. Courage was contagious. Quiet acts of bravery, sharing rations, rescuing the sick, writing secret messages of hope were the invisible threads holding the Army together. That night, as the wind howled across the snow-laden fields, Thomas made a silent vow. He would uncover the Raven, he would expose the conspiracy, and he would ensure that the stories of courage and sacrifice hidden in the frost and fog of Valley Forge would be remembered long after the war was won. But even as he slept, a figure cloaked in shadow observed him from the edge of the camp, watching, waiting, and calculating. The game had begun.
The night air was thick with frost and tension. Thomas Whitaker crouched behind a stack of firewood near the northern perimeter of Valley Forge, his breath forming small clouds in the cold. The decrypted notes had led him here, an abandoned barn on the edge of the encampment where whispered messages and hidden parcels suggested a secret rendezvous. Abigail's warning echoed in his mind: trust no one. Inside the barn, dim candlelight flickered against crates and barrels, casting long shadows that danced across the wooden walls. Thomas moved quietly, every nerve alert. Then he saw him, a tall, lean man with piercing gray eyes, draped in a dark coat that blended almost seamlessly with the night. The Raven. The man's presence was almost spectral, a shadow moving with precision and confidence. His eyes scanned the barn, as if sensing Thomas even before he moved. "You've been busy, Mr. Whitaker," the Raven said softly, his voice smooth and calculated, almost mocking. "I've heard whispers of your journal, your little investigations. Fascinating, really, but dangerous." Thomas tightened his grip on the journal. "Who are you really? Why target us? Why manipulate the Continental Army?"
The raven's lips curved into a thin, cold smile. "Manipulate? No, young man. I observe, I test, I ensure that the stronger rises and the weak fall. War is a game of strategy, and some pieces are meant to be sacrificed." Thomas stepped closer, heart racing. "Sacrifice lives? Families? You've caused deaths!" The raven tilted his head, examining Thomas as if amused by his indignation. "Perhaps, but consider this. Without me, you would not learn vigilance. Without struggle, courage is meaningless. You are already changing because of my actions, whether you see it or not." For a tense moment, silence filled the barn. Then, in a sudden blur, the raven moved toward a hidden trap-door beneath the hay. Thomas slammed his fist against the wood, frustration and fear coursing through him. "I'll find you," he whispered, determination stealing his voice. "And when I do, this war will no longer be your playground." Emerging from the barn, Thomas knew the stakes had shifted. This was no longer a series of intercepted messages or suspicious letters. It was a battle of wits, a deadly chess game where every move could cost lives. Abigail and Knox awaited him near the perimeter. Their expressions mirrored his own grim resolve. "He's clever," Knox said, his voice low, "but everyone has a weakness. We need patience, observation, and a plan." Abigail nodded, pulling a small satchel from beneath her cloak. "I've been tracking local loyalists and supply lines. There are patterns, hidden meetings, coded signals. If we combine this with your journal, Thomas, we can anticipate him." Thomas stared at the snow-covered fields, imagining the path the raven had taken, the network of spies from farms to taverns, even into the officer ranks. It was a labyrinth of deception, and he had only glimpsed the entrance. That night, as the army slept fitfully under canvas tents, Thomas wrote feverishly in his journal. Every detail of the encounter, every subtle movement of the raven was recorded. He knew that history would remember the Battle of Valley Forge for its hardship and heroism, but the secret war in the shadows, the unseen struggles against spies and saboteurs would remain hidden unless someone chronicled it. And Thomas Whitaker had vowed to do just that. Yet in the distance, a shadow moved silently across the frozen fields, observing, calculating, and smiling at the young man who thought he had seen it all. The raven had vanished, but the game was far from over. The last weeks of winter dragged on, and Valley Forge was slowly transforming. Supplies had been restored, morale was cautiously rebuilding, and the Continental Army had grown stronger under Washington's unyielding leadership. Yet for Thomas Whitaker, the war was far from over. The raven still eluded capture, his network of spies hidden across towns, taverns, and farms. Thomas, Abigail, and Knox spent countless nights tracing coded messages, following secret rendezvous, and interrogating loyalist sympathizers. Their breakthrough came when Thomas discovered a pattern. The movements of certain officers, always at odd hours, were tied to a small riverside town near the Delaware. It was there that the raven had orchestrated most of his communications. They traveled under the cover of darkness, avoiding British patrols and loyalist informants. The river was frozen, the cold biting, but Thomas pressed on. Every step brought them closer to the man who had haunted his journal, and every step tested his courage, resolve, and ingenuity. Finally, in a dimly lit tavern at the edge of the town, Thomas spotted him. The raven was unmasked, not a stranger, but Captain Elbridge Hutchins, the very officer whose suspicious behavior had first alerted Thomas. Hutchins had been exploiting his position in the army, funneling intelligence to the British while keeping his loyalty to them hidden under a facade of duty. "You found me," Hutchins said calmly, almost with admiration, as Thomas and Abigail confronted him. "I must admit I underestimated your persistence. Very few have ever followed the trail this far. Thomas clenched his fists. You betrayed your comrades, your country. You've endangered lives. Hutchins shrugged. I serve a greater purpose, Mr. Whitaker. The war is bigger than any single army, any single cause. Some sacrifices are necessary. But Thomas had anticipated this. Using the journal as evidence, he had prepared letters, sketches, and coded intercepts proving Hutchins' treachery. Abigail and Knox signaled the local militia, who swiftly surrounded the tavern. Hutchins' smirk faded as he realized his carefully laid plan had collapsed. With the threat neutralized, Thomas felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The Raven's shadow was gone, but the lessons remained: vigilance, courage, and the understanding that ordinary people could shape the course of history through small, decisive acts. Back at Valley Forge, the army began to spring back to life. Soldiers trained with renewed energy, supplies were organized, and Washington himself acknowledged the resilience of his men. Thomas documented every detail in his journal: the hardship, the bravery, the secret battles fought behind tents and letters. He knew this record was more than a story. It was a testament to the unsung heroes of the Revolution. As spring arrived, Thomas, Abigail, and Knox watched the snow melt into streams that carried the promise of new beginnings. The war was far from over, but the Continental Army was ready. And in his heart, Thomas carried a quiet knowledge that courage, intelligence, and integrity could illuminate even the darkest corners of human conflict. Years later, Thomas Whitaker's journal would survive. Historians would uncover it, revealing the hidden story of Valley Forge, not just of soldiers freezing and starving, but of spies, secret codes, acts of bravery, and ordinary people performing extraordinary deeds. It became a reminder that the struggle for freedom was as much about shadows and whispers as it was about cannon fire and battlefields. And somewhere in the annals of history, the Raven's story lingered as a warning. Even the cleverest of enemies can be unmasked, but only if ordinary men and women have the courage to act, to observe, and never surrender to fear. The end.